And after about 10 minutes, it was all going beautifully until all of a sudden, with no warning, he suddenly stiffened in the chair and became very agitated. And he was laid in the chair with his eyes closed, and he started to move around. His head was looking around, and his hands were gripped in fists, and he was starting to breathe heavily. And all of a sudden, he just started to half shout and half whisper. And he was saying things like, "No, no, they're coming. Hide. In here, quickly. Shh, hide. Bring the children, hide. No, 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 shush, shush, shush. Shh, quiet. They're coming, quickly." And I was sitting there with my script wondering what the hell's going on here. And then all of a sudden, he started to scream and writhe and yell and shake. But he was screaming, "No, no, 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 not the children, hide. No, 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 stop it. No, 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 don't. And the next thing, he's screaming and gasping. And then suddenly he just flopped down in the chair.
Hiya and welcome to AwakenToJoy. I'm Shem.
Je suis Omondi.
And today we are having a wonderful conversation with Steve Burgess. I'm going to let him introduce himself. And hi, Steve.
Hi, Steve.
Hi, thank you for having me. So to introduce myself to your viewers and listeners, I'm a hypnotherapist and regression specialist. I've been a hypnotherapist for over 34 years and have conducted over 15,000 therapy sessions in that time, many of which have been regression sessions. So my model of therapy is working in regression. Release clients' issues which are caused by traumas in the past. I've written 3 books, had 3 books published about regression work. The latest book, The Adventures of a Hypnotherapist, came out last year. And, I'm very passionate about regression therapy because I believe it's the most powerful therapeutic discipline that we have on planet Earth right now. So that's me.
This is brilliant. I'm kind of like this right now. Firstly, let's go back. So what first led you to hypnotherapy?
I actually fell into it quite by accident. I was a director of a publishing company which went bust and took some of my money with it. So I had to do something rather quickly because I had a young family at the time. And my dad just happened to mention, what about looking at hypnotherapy as a profession? Now, my dad had stopped smoking using hypnosis. And, hypnosis for smoking cessation is very, very effective. And my dad never understood how it had worked because my dad's a scientist by profession, a very left-brain man. He'd tried everything to stop smoking. For years, nothing had worked. And somebody sort of rather laughingly said to him, "Well, why don't you see a hypnotherapist?" And so he tried. And this gentleman who we went to see in Sheffield in England just guided him into a gentle trance state, gave him what we call post-hypnotic suggestions about letting go of cigarettes. And my dad didn't want to smoke anymore. And this just didn't make sense. It just didn't compute. His left brain was saying, this does not make sense. How was this worked? I was just laying there with my eyelids closed. I could hear what he was saying. I was just relaxed. And yet I don't want to smoke anymore. So he started to read up about hypnosis. And the more he read, the more fascinated he became. And so he then went and trained in hypnotherapy and started to play with it as a hobby, really, just working privately from home with friends and family and people who were recommended to him. So when he said, have a look at it, I thought, okay, well, let's look into this. And so I accidentally fell into the hypnotherapy profession, really. I went and did some training, which in the early days was quite rubbish. So I went and retrained and then found out how to do the job properly. And set up. And I always say I'm lucky because I think in every profession there are natural people who are natural at what they do. So some people are natural musicians, some people are natural sports people, some people are natural doctors, etc. Some people are naturally academic or legalistic. I'm just a natural therapist, so I was very lucky. I fell into it. And really never looked back. I mean, I've always had a very busy therapy practice. And now, of course, I do everything online, which is quite amazing. I mean, I have clients now in the last 5 years since the scamdemic started, and of course, everything went online. I have clients now in 32 countries around the world. And that's soon to be 33 because next week I'm seeing a client in Trinidad and Tobago. Never had anybody there before. So it's been quite a remarkable story in that way. I've been so lucky the way it's worked out.
That sounds very synchronistic, and it sounds like it was actually laid out for you.
Hmm.
Talking about destiny.
Yeah. But
Yeah, well, I
saying
think,
that,
I mean, if we go on from that into how I became a regression therapist, I mean, that again was completely by accident. When I first started being a hypnotherapist, I was just doing standard hypnotherapy. I'd guide my clients into trance. I'd give them post-hypnotic suggestions to help their subconscious mind, to help them to change and to let go of whatever issue they were working on, whether it was anxiety or a lack of confidence or a phobia or smoking or weight loss or whatever. And that's what I did until maybe 9 months, I can't remember, in the early days of my career. A young gentleman came into me with the most severe anxiety state I think I've ever seen, actually, even in the last 34 years. And he was in his early 20s. And he just sat in front of me and was a complete bag of nerves. I mean, he was shaking, he was hyperventilating, he was stuttering and stammering as he talked to me. And it was a real mess. And I said, so what's this about? How long have you had this for? He said, well, I've always been a worrier, but even as a child, I was a worrier. But as I got older, it's got worse and worse. And he said, then when the children came along a few years ago, it just got so bad that I just can't even work anymore. I had to give my job up. And I just sit at home shaking all day long. He said, the doctors are giving me tablets which don't work. My wife is sick of it. She's saying she can't take much more of it. And if I don't get better, she'll divorce me. But I don't know what to do. And sort of we talked in a bit more depth. So were there any events in your childhood which were very difficult or traumatic, which could have caused this anxiety to come on? He said, no, I had a decent childhood. My parents loved me. Okay. So I said, well, let's do a bit of work. And I guided him into trance. And he relaxed beautifully. He just remember, one of the elements of trance or hypnosis is relaxation. So he just softened down. I had a reclining chair in my office in those days. And he softened down, his breathing slowed down, and he was totally calm. And I'm thinking, this is pretty good, isn't it? In those days, in our early days as hypnotherapists, we tend to read from scripts because until you start to remember all the words. And I started just to give him hypnotic suggestions about letting go of his anxiety. From this time on, you'll be feeling much calmer. You'll be feeling much freer. The anxiety will be a thing of the past. The more anxious you used to be, now the more calm you're going to be. And things like that, to put these positive suggestions into his subconscious mind. And after about 10 minutes, it was all going beautifully until all of a sudden, with no warning, he suddenly stiffened in the chair and became very agitated. And he was laid in the chair with his eyes closed and he started to move around. His head was looking around and his hands were gripped in fists and he was starting to breathe heavily. And all of a sudden, he just started to half shout and half whisper. And he was saying things like, no, they're coming, hide. In here, quickly, shh, hide. Bring the children, hide. No, shush, quiet, they're coming, quickly. And I was sitting there with my script wondering what the hell's going on here. And then all of a sudden he started to scream and writhe and yell and shake. I actually do a one-man show called The Power of Past Life Regression, and I demonstrate this fully by showing what happened. But I can't do it online because it'll blow the speakers. But he was screaming, no, not the children, hide, no, stop it, no, don't. And the next thing, he's screaming and gasping, and then suddenly he just flopped down in the chair. And he was completely quiet, totally calm. I wasn't. My heart was banging away. I'm thinking, what the hell's going on here? I said, what was happening? And he was still in trance, laid with his eyes closed. He said, it was weird. He said, what was that? He said, I was like a man in another body, in another time. There were soldiers, Nazis coming looking for me and my children. We tried to hide, and then they found us and they shot us and killed us all. What was that about? So I said, well, at that time, I hadn't trained in past lives, but I knew about past lives. I'd been a Buddhist for many years, so I understood the concept of reincarnation. So I said, you've been in a past life. How do you feel? He said, I feel wonderful. I feel absolutely, I've never felt this calm in my life before. And his anxiety state was cured in about 15 minutes. And I thought, why don't I know about this? This is so significant. So I started to look at past life regression, got some stuff over from the American Association and started to play with it with my clients, including running past life group workshops for groups of people. And now I've developed a regression system, which is so complete that we can even find out how many past lives are causing the issue for my client, as well as other things as well. So that young man, you talk about synchronistically, changed my career, changed my life in so many ways.
That's fascinating.
I'm getting shivers because I was always interested in Buddhism as well, growing up, though brought up Baptist. Got kicked out of Sunday school, so that wasn't a long-term thing for me.
I left Sunday school when I started asking. I was about 8, I think. I said, well, who is Satan? And they said, well, we don't know, but he's bad. So I said, well, can you draw him? Can you describe him? So I said, no, we don't. We can't do it. And I thought, well, you don't know what you're talking about here.
You'd have been with me in the canteen, like, okay, we're in charge of sandwiches, and apparently we're not allowed in there because that's what they did to me. But his story reminds me a lot of the first time that I'd encountered experience in one of my own past lives. I've experienced a lot of my own past lives, and I just thought they were bad dreams I was dying in. And funny enough, the war came up. So when you said that, I was like, that tracks so well, and I wonder how many people listening would be like, maybe maybe this is something I'm going to need to address soon, because we speak so often about dreams, lucid dreams, and some people do really remember some stuff, and I'm like, that's the past life, and you could probably do with having a look at that.
But very often, a historical dream, a dream with a historical context, is very often from a past life. Not always, but very often, especially if it's a nightmare, especially if it's a recurring nightmare of a historical nature. That nearly always is from a past life. And it very often is from a death in a past life. And I would say that most past life regression is about 60% of it is releasing death trauma. And so it's just the way it is, we can die horribly. We bring the energy of that death into this lifetime, and it affects us in different ways. The most common, of course, is anxiety. But the regression model, if I can just cover that for a few moments to give some background to that. Because the regression model is that all of our issues as human beings, and nowadays I used to say most of our issues, nowadays I say all of our issues, come from locked in feelings and emotions from past traumas. And the issues can be, multiple issues: physical illness, phobias, anxieties, depression, lack of confidence, sexual issues, relationship issues, cancer, you name it. Skin problems, obsessive compulsive disorder, etc., etc. You don't catch these things. They are caused by locked-in feelings and emotions from past traumas, and those traumas can take place in any one or more of 3 areas. First of all, this lifetime, and most of us have got emotional baggage from this life. It's very rare to find somebody who doesn't have some emotional baggage from the present lifetime. The second area, past lives, the most well known. But the third area is not very well known, and it's still incredibly significant. And these are ancestral traumas. These are traumas we inherit from ancestors in our bloodline, from our parents, our grandparents, our great-grandparents, our great-grand, etc., etc. They can go back a long way. And for some clients, we've got to work in all three areas in order to fully heal the issue that they're bringing.
It's very
So
relevant.
that's the concept.
When you talk about ancestral trauma, this got me thinking about epigenetics.
Mm.
Mm.
Is it what
Yeah,
you're referring to?
absolutely. Yes. In most cases, it's like it's in the DNA. It's like in the genes. It's brought down genetically from that ancestor. Just to give you an example of a typical case, I wrote about this. I start the last book, Adventures of Hypnotherapist, with this client, and she had a combination of anxiety, trichotillomania. You know what trichotillomania is?
Absolutely not.
No.
Okay, it's hair pulling hair out. Hers is a bit different. So I've treated this occasionally in the past. I remember a young lady years ago she called me on the phone and she said, I've been pulling my hair out with trichotillomania, and I want to stop. So I said, come to see me. And she came to my office, and she had a beret on, beret
Yeah.
on her head. And she had hair. And I said, she sat down in front of me and said, I thought you were pulling your hair out. And she took her beret off and the top of her head was completely bald. So she left a ring of hair so people, when she had a beret on, couldn't see that she was bald. She spent all day pulling her hair out. I had another young lady whose trichotillomania was about shaving her legs. She would spend hours, literally hours, shaving her legs before she could go out for a date with her boyfriend. And even then, she'd shave them over and over, and then she'd probably spend 20 minutes with a tweezer looking for the occasional hair. I mean, this is a form of obsessive compulsive disorder. But this lady I write about in the book, her trichotillomania was pulling her eyelashes out. That's her form of trichotillomania. But she also had teeth grinding during the night, etc., etc. And her subconscious indicated that the roots of the problem were all three. She had some emotional baggage from this life, some past lives, and some ancestral trauma. We started off, let me just check. Actually, I always forget what the order is. We went into a past, we did some work on this life, but she went into a past life where she was a male factory owner in Victorian times. So she was a young man who took over the family business that the father had built up and wanted to make the business bigger. So look, it borrowed a lot of money, moved into bigger premises, and it was one of these big factories, with hundreds of people working and machinery and all sorts of going on. But business went sour and eventually went bust. And the stress that man felt through the months as things were going wrong and he had to lay people off, and then the business went bust, eventually caused him to have a heart attack and die. So, there's the stress under the surface that she was reacting to. Her way of relieving stress is grinding her teeth or pulling her eyelashes out. In another session, she went into an ancestor's life where the ancestor was, again, a male, and he was actually up here in where I am in East Yorkshire, in the port of Hull. He was a man on a trawler, and he was like the skipper of a trawler going out to fish day after day. And actually, he quite enjoyed the life, although it was a tough life. But one day they were out in a very stormy sea, and a young deckhand gets swept overboard, and they can't find him, and he dies. And they can't find his body. And again, the guilt that man felt, I could have been there for him. If I'd have been a minute earlier, I could have stopped him from whatever. So all the stress of the guilt. Then went into a past life where she was, again, she was an African girl in a village in, I guess, sometime in the 50s and 60s, maybe the last life before this one. And there was a lot of conflict around, and the men of the village had to go out and fight. And some of them never came back. Well, they came back dead, obviously. And again, there was a lot of stress. She then went into another ancestor's life, where probably the 1910s, 1920s, where again she was a male, but this time she was a senior mechanic or engineer on a big ship that was ready to get launched, but they were having problems with the engine, and he had to find what the heck was going on before the ship could get launched. And again, lots of stress, lots of worry. And eventually they found what the problem was and got it fixed so the ship could go out on its official launch date. So there's a sort of some stories from just one client. And we didn't do all this in one session, of course. This took quite a few sessions. But as we did each session, the teeth grinding got easier and easier, until the teeth grinding on a night completely stopped. Her anxieties were really came right down, and the eyelash pulling was stopped as well. So I often, although everybody talks a lot about past lives, I always want people to remember that ancestral trauma can be just as deep and just as far rooted and far ranging as the past life stuff.
Okay.
I really love the array of stories you told, because two things stood out. That it transcended country and it transcended gender as well. So do you find that a lot of people, when they do have these experiences, kind of come away from it with a deeper understanding of them people from, or what they may have thought about people from a totally different country or a totally different gender to them, or whatever it is, like they have a different view about it now, or at least...
I think there are several things, Shem, that come through. I call beneficial side effects. So one is that the person often loses a fear of dying. And so many people have a fear of death. They realize that we are eternal. We go on from life to life, and therefore there's really no need to be scared of dying. Two is they become less reactive generally. And what I mean by that is most of us live our lives in a very reactive way. So we hear something, we get triggered, we react to it. And often a person who has got a lot of emotional baggage, they tend to react like that when things happen. It's a big issue. What happens with any good therapy, actually, not just regression, but with any good therapy, a person becomes less reactive so that when things happen in life, they get less triggered. And ultimately, with lots of really good therapy, then this is where we can be, which is really very balanced and being very non-reactive. Ultimately, I find that clients who work on themselves and do the work in this way very often fall into the process of what's called non-duality, which is where everything just is, and there's a sort of a oneness about everything. And that also leads on to what you were saying, more of a connection to all humanity and less judgmentalism about people from other parts of the world. People start to realize that we're not separate. We are all one. We are all connected. And that's a beautiful side effect from good therapy, and especially regression therapy. Maybe I ought to start charging for that.
I think that's a really great idea.
So Steve, I mean, I've got quite a long question for you. So many traditions use different language to describe our inner experience. So from your perspective, how would you distinguish between the conscious mind, the subconscious mind, the unconscious, the id, the ego, the superego, the soul, and the spirit?
Okay. Let's start with the sort of basic concept. The Freudian concept of the mind is that the mind is like an iceberg, and the tip of the iceberg above the waves is the conscious thinking mind. The part of the mind that we use to analyze, as you're listening to me now, you're analyzing and thinking with the tip of the mind. That is about 0.01% of our mental capability. So the vast bulk of the iceberg beneath the conscious mind, beneath the waves, is the subconscious, also known as the unconscious. The Americans tend to call it the unconscious. In the UK, we tend to say subconscious. This is the 99.9% of the mind that we don't overtly use on a day-to-day basis. It's actually the engine room of the mind. And this is one reason why hypnotherapy is so powerful, because when we go into trance, we start using the engine room of the mind, the powerhouse of the mind. The subconscious is the seat of our emotions, the seat of our intuition. So as you and your viewers are listening to me talking, The conscious mind is analysing, but they'll also be intuiting under the surface. Does this feel right? Does this fella feel right in what he's saying? Can I trust what he's saying? And that's all happening subconsciously. The subconscious is the seat of our imagination, the seat of our creativity. And in my opinion, it contains all the memories that go way, way back through time. My belief, having done this work for so long, is that we all have a higher self. And my belief is that the higher self is the all-knowing, all-wise part of us. I believe that either is the subconscious mind or may be intimately connected to the subconscious. So when we're working with the subconscious part of the mind, we're working with the wise part of the mind that understands the client, knows what's best for the client. Now, in terms of things like the id and the ego, superego, etc., then we really don't look at those in regression. Those are really from a Freudian perspective. Freud came up with these ideas that we have an ego, etc., etc. But from a regression perspective, there's no real value in them, whether they're real or not, because the regression concept is very simple. All of our issues are caused by locked-in feelings and emotions from past traumas, or sometimes we need to get understanding from the past about something that makes sense of something now. In terms of higher than that, the soul, well, I can only go by what comes through in my client sessions and what I've read over the years. Nobody truly knows, of course. But the concept is that we have the physical body. When we die, we leave the physical, our light body, our astral body, goes into spirit world. And that's where our soul group is, the group of souls who have been around us over many lifetimes in different ways. And our soul is our sort of where we're totally free. And, when people go into, when they go through a regression death in a past life, and they just feel so free and so peaceful to be away from the restrictions of being in this body and all the nonsense that goes on here on planet Asylum.
So what would you say the
gosh.
common misconception is about hypnosis?
Great question. It's not sleep. It's not coma. So, one of the problems is many people see stage hypnotists at work. And stage hypnosis is really about, in my opinion, perverting the beauty of hypnosis because it's making fools of people. And of course, ultimately, unfortunately nowadays, quite a lot of stage hypnosis is what I call gutter hypnosis. It's disgusting. It is utterly disgusting. It's utterly demeaning to women. They'll do all sorts of filthy, disgusting things on stage. I just think that's not right. So, but people see the stage hypnotist go sleep, and of course everybody flops down, and so they think everybody's asleep. They're not asleep. You could use the word duckbill platypus, and people would still go into trance. So, but people think it's sleep, and of course hypnosis is the Greek god of sleep. And the Victorian medic who created the concept of hypnosis, or hypnotism as he called it, pretty soon realised he'd given it the wrong word, but by that time it had become common parlance, so it was too late to change it. But the word I use a lot is trance. Okay, so hypnotic trance. Now, what is a trance? When we're in trance, we're just in a state of inner focus generally. When we go into hypnosis, we're not asleep, we're not under a coma, we're not under anything. People always use this word under, which really cheeses me off. In fact, the strapline on the book, Adventures of a Hypnotherapist, was I under? Because the number of times at the end of a session with one of my clients, I'll bring them out of trance and they'll say, well, I don't think I was under. I could hear what you were saying. Oh, I could have opened my eyes if I wanted. It's like a red rag to a bull, the word under, to a hypnotherapist. You don't go under hypnosis, you go into hypnosis. You don't go under trance, you go into trance. But of course, being under implies being under anaesthetic as well. So many people think that when you're in hypnosis, you're completely gone. You just lay there with your eyes closed, with your tongue hanging out and dribble coming down the side of your chin. That's not hypnosis. Hypnosis is trance, is a state of relaxation, inner relaxation, where we become more focused. And when we become more focused, that's when the subconscious mind is more able to come through. So just a few examples of everyday trance. Daydreaming. And most of us daydream at least 24 times a day, okay? And that's a trance state. Going on automatic pilot in the car, driving without realizing you're driving. That's trance, that's hypnosis. Drifting into sleep, drifting out of sleep, that's trance. Focusing on something, focusing on a book or a movie, that's trance. You and I, we're in trance now. We are focusing on this conversation. We're not thinking about what we've got to cook for dinner later or the email we've got to write. Well, hopefully not. Hopefully you're listening to me.
or even getting your name right? Like all of those
that
things.
would be a thing.
So trance is natural, and I always want my clients to understand it's a natural process. Meditation is trance. So what tends to happen is people think trance is something other than what it is. They think it's something paranormal. It isn't. It's just a normal state. It's an everyday occurrence. It's just that in a hypnotherapy setting, we tend to emphasize the relaxational elements and the closing the eyes down and going inside. But we're still in control. We still know what's going on when we're in trance. We can still hear the traffic going past or the dog barking next door or whatever. We can still think, what are we going to, what's happening now? Although some people do go very deep into trance and their conscious thinking mind does tend to slow down a little bit. But for most of us, we're still very mentally active, you could say. But that trance, that inner state, allows the subconscious to come. You could say it comes from the back part to the front part of the mind. Because if our conscious mind holds it at bay all the time by chattering all the time and analysing and looking and being aware, once we close our eyelids, the conscious mind has got nothing to do, really. And so it slows down quite naturally. And then the subconscious it's like a flower. It's been overshadowed by this conscious mind. The conscious drifts off and the sunlight reaches the subconscious, and like a flower, it just opens out.
Steve, people needed to hear that, because the amount, even for meditation, which I do some guided meditations for people, and I'm like, just daydream into it. Don't try and make a fuss about this. And I love the fact that you had likened it to, stepping away from being under something, because that implies that the person is out of control and that somehow
under the control of the therapist.
Exactly. And I think that is another fear or another hurdle to,
because many people are controllers,
right?
And they need to be in control, and they think, I'm going to lose control if I go to see the hypnotherapist. No, you ain't. Not at all.
Well,
you heard it here, folks.
I was going to ask, some people seem to enter I'm not going to say hypnosis anymore, trance very easily, and other seems to be more resistant. Why is that?
Good point. Right. There tend to be 4 what I call abilities in terms of going into trance. Some people would use the word susceptibilities, but that's negative. No, these are abilities. And about 25 to 30% of people are naturally very good at trance. At least 1 in 4, maybe 1 in 3 of people, I call these number ones. And these are people who are just very good at trance. Number 2s are people who are good at trance. They don't go in quite as easily into trance as number 1s, but they can get there quite quickly. Most people are number 3s, just average at hypnosis. So when they're in trance, they just lay there relaxing and the conscious mind is still ticking over. Number 4s are people who are just crap at hypnosis. It just doesn't suit them. Very few, because we can all go into trance, because we all go into trance naturally. But for people who are controllers, it's often a controlling male, to be honest, because men can be so damn controlling, I'm sorry to say. So most people who struggle with hypnosis refuse to let go. They're just scared, or they just can't let go. But with the people who are very good at hypnosis, these are the people that stage hypnotists will use. So stage hypnotists, before the act, will get as many people up on stage as possible to do a hypnotic test. We call it a suggestibility test. Maybe the hands will get stuck together. 3/4 of the people, when the hypnotist says, try and pull your hands apart, you won't be able to. The hands come apart. 25 to 30% of people go, Oh shit, my hands are stuck together. Oh, and they're the 1 in 4s. They're the number ones. And then the stage hypnotist uses what we call shock tactic hypnosis, rapid hypnosis, to get them, bang them in trance quickly, confuse them, and then the act begins, and then they're just made fools of. So some people are just very good, and people who are very good in trance, number ones, I mean, we can get extraordinary results with them. I mean, just as an example of this, this is a lady who 28 years ago now, I think, she came to me with a very serious liver disease, and she'd been given 6 months to live by her specialist. And the liver disease is one where tumours grow on the liver, and they grow to the size of melons, grapefruits, and lemons and things. So it isn't cancerous. It's actually a liver disease which is very rare, called focal nodular hyperplasia. And there's only about 12 cases in the UK at any one time. And hers was the most aggressive. And she was in her mid-30s. She was in agonizing pain all the time. She couldn't do anything. She just laid on a bed vomiting most of the day. She couldn't eat. She had a young daughter. She couldn't do anything with the young daughter. And she had to be helped up to my office. She could hardly walk. 2 people had to bring her in to see me and brought her up 2 flights of stairs to my office. And she looked like a stick insect because she'd lost so much weight. And she shared the story of this illness. And she said, "You're my last hope. The surgeon has said I've got 6 months to live." And I thought, oh, well, there's no pressure there then, is there? So I explained the concept of all illness has emotional causes. All illness. And she understood that. I took her into trance in that first session, and she went into trance beautifully. And I knew that I had an ace up my sleeve. She was a number one. She was very good in trance. That therefore gave me a lot of confidence that I could help her. So in that session, that first session, I gave her some hypnotic suggestions. She's going to start feeling better. She came out of trance and she looked a different person. And the pain which was in the liver at the start when she sat in front of me, which was 10 out of 10, had gone down to 4 out of 10. So she started to feel better. She could walk down the stairs out of my office unaided. She came back a week later. She'd actually stopped taking all the painkillers that weren't working anyway, and she started to get her life back because these things were drugging her up. She was in a daze most of the time. I didn't tell her to do that. She just did it because she knew she didn't need it. Didn't need them. I taught her self-hypnosis, so I taught her how to take herself into trance, and we then started to work on the emotional roots of the illness, traumas in this life, 2 past lives, and those were interesting. In one of the past lives, she was a young Native American woman who was, her village was raided by another tribe, and a warrior came up behind her, grabbed her, and stabbed her in the back and killed her. And of course, where did the dagger go?
Liver.
Right through the liver area. In the second past life, she was a young Polish teenage boy in the Second World War who was bayoneted virtually to death by Nazis. So the bayonets went through again into that side of the body and then thrown into a river to drown and die. So we released the traumas, and over time, she started to get better and better and better. And what happened is the tumours stopped growing. Some of them shrank a little bit, but the tumours stopped growing. Now, she got stronger and stronger. She got her life back. She was able to eat. And at this stage, her specialist, her surgeon, said, well, I think we can do some surgery now. He'd done the surgery twice before with her, and it was a total failure. And the object of the surgery was to thread a tube up through the blood vessels from the groin to the liver and then inject crystals or coils up the tube. The idea was that those would attach themselves to the tumours, cut off the blood supply to the tumours, and the tumours would die and shrink off. But it's a very delicate operation, and at the start of the op, she has to drink a dye down so that he can see up on a screen in the operating theatre what's happening in her body. And she was highly allergic to virtually everything. So as she drank the dye down, she could hardly have any pain killing. She was very allergic to painkillers as well. She just started retching and vomiting. So throughout the whole of the surgery, and this happened twice, she was just vomiting and retching and in pain. And of course, the poor surgeon's trying to do a delicate operation. The first time he actually damaged the liver itself. The second time he damaged her gallbladder, and she had to have a gallbladder removed. And both times she was in hospital for 2.5 weeks after the surgery. She turned up at my office one Monday morning and she said, I've seen my specialist, the surgeon at the hospital last week, and he wants to do the operation again. And suddenly these words came out of my mouth: we'll do the operation in hypnosis. And then I looked round, I thought, who the hell said that? Shit, it was me. Mouth. And she said, really? I said, yes. Okay. Shit. Now what am I going to do? She said, well, I'll have a word with the specialist. I'll have a word with the surgeon, see what he says. Well, I thought, no way is he going to say, we'll do the operation in hypnosis. And he said, yes. And at that stage, I'm thinking, well, this is serious. You don't get trained as a hypnotherapist to work in surgery without anaesthetic. Because that was the aim of it, is to do the whole surgery with no anaesthesia. So we started to rehearse. Now, I knew she was a number one. Going back to your question, Amanda, she was a number one. So I thought we could do this. And I rehearsed taking her into trance, anaesthetizing her body with her mind so she wouldn't feel anything. And when the day of the surgery came, it was a bit of a shambles to start with because various reasons. I write about it in the book. I'm trying to make it as funny as possible. I was terrified, absolutely bloody terrified. And I got into the operating theatre, and she's laid there, on the operating table, and all the staff are standing around, and all the machines are beeping, and there's soft, subdued lighting, and I'm standing there in the cap and the gown and all the gear. And the surgeon then turned to me and he said, the anaesthetist, of course, she wasn't happy. She was standing there like this with her face like a slapped ass.
You're going to take my job, aren't you?
Exactly. You're going to take my job. So, willing me to fail. And the surgeon then turned to me and said, right, you've got 5 minutes, get going. We've got another operation to do after this with somebody else. So I guided her into trance, and because we'd rehearsed, she went into trance. I anaesthetized her body. And then I got her to disassociate herself by bringing her out of her body, almost like you're doing a sort of lucid dream type thing, bringing her out of her body, taking her up through all the 13 floors of the hospital. And throughout the whole of the surgery, I was with her, taking her on a journey through the stars all the time, because I thought, you don't want to be in your body, you don't want to be watching it. The only person who had a problem with the surgery was me. It was a fantastic success. I forgot that I had a phobia of blood. And I looked round at just the wrong time. So I got her into trance and I said to the surgeon, okay, go for it. And as I looked, he said, right. And he took a scalpel. And as he made a slit into her groin, a spurt of blood shot in the air. And I just saw it and went, oh. I went green and white and purple and shit and sweating. And the surgeon looked at me and said, are you okay? I said, no, not really. He said, get him a stool. So they plonked me down on a stool, and I think I've got to do this for her. It's true, she could die. So I managed to bring myself round and then stayed with her throughout the surgery. The surgery took 90 minutes. The previous 2 times it had been 2.5 hours and it had been a disaster. This time it was amazing. The whole thing went perfectly. At the end of the surgery, the surgeon said to me, he said, I have never seen anything like this in my career. He said, it was like operating on a dead body. There were no defensive reflexes. He said, I need to know about this. Give me one of your cards and I'll give you a call and we'll talk about it. I'm still waiting for that call 28 years later, but that lady is now 28 years past her die-by date. She even had a young son a few years later. So talk about the power of the mind. We did the healing, we did the therapy, we did use the mind to heal the body and to anesthetize the body. So it was just, yeah, it was just quite an extraordinary experience for me as a therapist.
You're literally saving life,
Yeah.
literally. And you know what? It's funny because you said, and I had a question about intuition and the correlation between intuition and our subconscious mind, but you were referring to the higher self, and I think that was what it was for you. Your higher self just stepped in and
I'll do
Yeah,
it.
just
yeah.
yeah, exactly, yeah, yeah. Because honestly, for days afterwards, I was thinking, why did you say that, you nitwit? But it just came out, and I'm sure it was my higher self. It just knew we could get a result here.
Yeah.
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 But yeah,
Some
scary stuff.
I think this story is going to speak to a lot of people. For many, because out of body experiences are something that our crowd are quite accustomed to, whether it be through meditation or whether it just be through different ways that they do it, whether it's like going through the sleep process or whatever that may be, you know, mind awake, body asleep, and the different ways that they go through that. Hearing it done through a hypnosis as well kind of likens up to our concept of it, which is take the people sensationalize things and then they pedestal things. And what I love about the way that you've explained stuff, Steve, is the fact that it's like, okay, you're in control and you've gone into a trance. Like, don't make this more than what this is. You've got this. And to hear that you've been able to be that guide for somebody to go through something that's so transformative for her, I think really allows people to step back into that understanding that that's their power and that the body and their subconscious are so intertwined and
Totally.
so much part of their experience together. They can also be they could be in the front seat of their healing as well. And
I
yeah,
think
it's just
the
stories.
mind and body are totally connected, and I think what you know, a case that I've just had in the last few months, and you know, regression therapy isn't a fun therapy. It isn't a fun process. It can be very unpleasant because we're going back into bloody horrible stuff from the past in order to release the energies and the emotions, and it takes a lot of courage to do that. And also for therapists, you know, our job is to get our client there and then hold the space for them, keep them safe. But a few months ago, a lady got in touch with me. She's had stomach pains for 36 years, every day for 36 years, since she was 10 years old. And when the pain gets bad, it's at 10 out of 10. An average day is 4 out of 10. A good day is 2 out of 10. But the pain is there all the time. She's tried exclusion diet. She's seen the doctor. She's had the oscopies, endoscopy, colonoscopy, whatever. They can't find anything. And often with a mystery illness, it's nearly always from a past life, you know, nearly always. And she's a lady, actually, she's a lady from Sierra Leone, lovely lady. And she told me after we did the first session or two that she said she came through, came through from an evangelical Christian background, and she was always taught that all this hypnosis stuff was the work of the devil. So, you know, she was, as they do. But there were 3 past lives causing the stomach problem. And the first past life she relived in the first session was a young Chinese girl who was sold into slavery by her brother. And she ends up on a slave ship below decks in terrible circumstances. People are terrified. Obviously, she's a young girl. She's terrified. There's not enough food. There's very little water. People start to get sick. People dying and everything else. And eventually this poor young girl dies of malnutrition, dehydration, and whatever else, and sickness. All the way through the session, the poor lady was feeling the pain in her body. You know, she was feeling these horrible somatics, we call them. You know the word psychosomatic. A somatic is a physical feeling that's caused by the mind. And she was reliving the pains from the past life experience and death of the girl. And she died and went into spirit. I saw her a month later for the second session. She hadn't had a single episode of stomach pain in a month. It had been completely cleared for that month. Bear in mind, she'd had it every day for 36 years. But there was still more work to do. So we went into the second session. She went into a second past life where she's a young teenage boy, dragged into battle against his wishes and gets speared in the stomach and dies. So there's again the connection with the stomach. Again, not fun, but we release the terror and the feelings in the body. I saw her on Monday this week for her third session, hoping that everything had been going well. She said that the pain again after the last session, it had not come back at all. She hadn't had any problems. But 2 days before our session on Monday, the pain had come back out of nowhere. And she said it's been very strong. So I knew what this was. Basically, her subconscious was already resonating with the session we were going to do on Monday because it was bringing the pain through in advance. It knew where we were going to go. The subconscious, all knowing, all wise, but it was resonating 2 days before the session by bringing the pain through. And the session on Monday, she was a young boy whose family were nobles or elites or royalty or whatever, living in castles. But there was a coup d'etat created by the boy's father's sister who wanted to take over, and the whole of their family was thrown in jail and they were poisoned. So as a young boy, she relived the poisoning, brought her out of trance at the end, and the pain is completely gone. So as far as I'm concerned, that stomach pain, which she's had for 36 years, should now be totally cured. I'm going to contact her again in a couple of weeks, just check if we need to do a bit more work. Now, that's a bit unusual because that's very fast. I mean, some people need extensive therapy. They may need 10 sessions, 20 sessions, 30 sessions. We don't know. Depends on all sorts of factors. But occasionally we get these very rapid results, and it's just remarkable.
So what's really interesting, because
go for it.
It's really, really interesting, because that leads me to my question as well about, according to you, Steve, what do you believe is being healed? Is it the mind, the subconscious, or so like the nervous system? And the reason why I'm asking you this is because you often hear people saying that basically the subconscious is the part of you that you can't control and does whatever, and sometimes not so good things, and you need to heal the subconscious in order for you to just then behave or to stop certain things happening in your life. So what is it that's actually being healed?
I mean, technically it's hard to say because obviously we're talking about amorphous things, but to try and answer your question as best I can, I think it's multifactorial. I think there's a whole range of things can happen. So physically, the energy field that we all have, we have an energy field, the body is an energy field. That energy field locks in energies, traumas, emotions. We work in regression in 5 negative emotions: anger, sadness, fear, anxiety, guilt. Those are the 5 root negative emotions. And some people we work in all 5, sometimes it's just 1. So at a physical level, at a physiological level, we're releasing from the energy field traumas from the past that are locked in the energy field, causing physical problems now, anxieties, physical illness, etc. From a psychological perspective, we're clearing some energy that's in the mind in some way. How that is held in the mind, I don't know. I don't think anybody can ever tell you. It's just like there's some sort of energy that is brought through from the past. It gets locked in the deeper part of the mind and it's just held there. And the subconscious doesn't analyze, it just knows what is, it just holds things. You can work with it and bring it out, but it usually, whatever is in the subconscious is in the subconscious. And then at a cognitive level, there's also great healings come in as well. So we start to understand things more deeply. So, we may work with a relationship issue and my client will say, oh, so there's no wonder my mother's always hated me in this life. I killed her in a past life. Of course she's going to hate me. And that makes so much sense. So there's a relief mentally, you could say, psychologically. So we get these understandings from the past, and that can heal us. Sometimes there's what we call a reframe. If we're working on childhood wounds in this life, and we do a lot of work healing the wounds of childhood, and helping to heal the inner child. And we all have an inner child. How our inner child is feeling is how we live as an adult. And it may be that as a result of therapy, the client says, so no wonder my father was always horrible and an alcoholic, because he was just a very wounded child himself. His father used to beat shit out of him day after day. His father used to beat his mother up. Of course, there's no wonder my father was angry and hurt. And he just brought that energy into bringing me up as a child. And sometimes that understanding, we call that a reframe. You see it from a different perspective. Whereas before, you've demonized your father or been angry with him. He was always not nice with me. And that doesn't mean to say you let go of his responsibility, because we all have a responsibility to do the best we can. But it actually softens the pain. I understand now. No wonder my father was always in a bad way, because he was just like me. He was a wounded little boy. That makes sense. And so there's a healing there. So there's all these different levels of healing, Amondi. That's the thing. It's just amazing how it works.
Yeah, I mean, you did mention the inner child, and I know Shem talks a lot about that. I mean, you've done a couple of meditation based on the kind of recollecting the inner child and stuff like that. But there's something that actually, there's like a pattern there, because you were talking about this lady story, and it's always in the stomach region. It's almost as if like, if you don't sort certain things during this lifetime, then your soul or your higher self will just choose to come back and have like a similar story again. Right near the same region, you're going to have something happening to you until you can like address it. And to me, that raises the question, why is it that people don't understand that when you have recurring pattern, maybe we need to look into that particular aspect pattern, and it's often like randomized. People say, well, no, that's just what it is, or whatever.
Yeah,
obviously
it's just the way I am.
that's the way I am. Yeah. And you see that sometimes even with our personality, or when you got people facilitating other people for the way they behave and saying like, oh, that's how he is, or that's how she is, and we let that go. But it seems to me that you're going to only come back to reproduce that experience for yourself. And I mean, I don't know what you think about that and that concept.
Well, I think there are various levels to that. First of all, people don't understand, because from a reincarnation perspective, a lot of people don't believe in reincarnation because they've not looked at it, they've not been brought up to look at it, or it's been made ridicule by various authorities and what have you. When you really start doing the research into reincarnation, real research, you realize it's so damn real. It's just so damned obvious. Why? For example, my client with the stomach problems, brought up as an evangelical Christian, started to look around at different things, was a bit desperate, came to me. Why on earth would she go back into past lives in order to clear this problem? What's that about? That doesn't make sense. And she's not one can short of a six-pack. She's a very intelligent woman. So why do people do that? Why do people come and go into these horrible past life experiences sometimes in order to get better, when they very often don't believe in the concept of reincarnation? So very often we're not brought up to look at it. We think it's a weird Eastern tradition, but actually, when we really look at it, it's very real. So I think that's one reason why people don't think about these things. The second thing is, people don't want to do the work on themselves. Okay, we're in a different mind game than we were 50 years ago, or even 30 years ago when I first started doing this. The growth of the understanding of therapy and its importance, and we have emotional baggage, let's work on it, has grown exponentially. But people don't like to do the work on themselves. And this is one of my soapboxes that I bang on a little bit about nowadays, because the medical model is about giving everybody a tablet. This is what it's about. You go to the doctor, it's give you a tablet. They never ask you about lifestyle. They never ask you about diet. They never ask you about your vitamin supplements. It's, oh, well, you've got this problem. It says in the book, I'll give you this tablet, because the medical industry is dominated by the pharmaceutical industry, which is all about making money and keeping people sick. Because if you keep people sick, you keep making money. Now, I'm not saying that pharmaceuticals don't do great work. They do. But the model is about giving people a tablet. That means I don't have to do anything. Look at Ozempic, weight loss tablets. I don't have to do anything. I don't have to change my life. I'll take a tablet. Change your life, for goodness sake.
Stop taking it.
Then you don't have to take a tablet. Then there's all the side effects. Right. So people don't want to do the work. And also, because we live fast lives and everything is instant nowadays. If we're queuing in the post office for more than 2 minutes, we get irritated and bothered. We switch a light on and the light comes on immediately, a light switch. Everything's immediate, but therapy can take time. It's often like peeling the layers of an onion, and over time the layers come away and then you get free. So there are all these reasons why people don't always want to do therapy, but a lot of the time it's because they don't want to face into what's going on inside, because that's the scary thing. And I'll be honest, most of my clients, I would say 75% of my clients are female, always have been, because men are control freaks. Always remember what Dustin Hoffman, the great actor, said. All men are controlling pricks. That's what he said. It was in terms of relationships. All men want to control the remote control, in a relationship. Well, that's bullshit. Let's have a new model of relationships. Let's have women more respectful. But men don't always want to let go very easily. So, and of course, unfortunately, we live in a patriarchal society, which is primarily controlled by men. So therefore, they're not going to advocate using therapy. They're going to dismiss that as all nonsense. That's a soft thing to do. But people don't want to do the work. And as you said, if you don't do it now, you'll take the shit into your next life with you.
Yeah. I'm really happy you mentioned this, Steve, because we often cover the nature of this reality. So this is what we talk about, out-of-body experience and things that people may think that is very weird, but in actual fact, we've experienced that ourselves. And I often say something. I say, sometime when I look what happened, certain events like in 2020, without saying the word, we must have
Pandemic.
been under hypnosis or some sort of hypnosis to accept certain things. Even 2008, the financial crisis, we accepted certain deals, and I was like, okay, what's going on here? And I always think like there's a truth to hypnosis, because I cannot believe that we're that dumb to really get all wrapped up into this situation, and then complain later. And you mentioned masculinity, really, because it is so true. There is for me, there is a programming that's been happening, because I don't think that is our natural self. I just think there's a constant therapy used on us, but we just don't realize, and we're too stuck up to admit that and be like, what, perhaps there's some truth to it.
And perhaps we've been in a bigger trance than we'd all like to say.
Basically, yeah.
We admit to, and perhaps it's had a deeper effect than we'd like to admit as well. Hence why we're like, am I in the fucking Twilight Zone? Does no one see this bullshit that's happening right now?
Yeah.
And then you just think to yourself, all right, looks like a
it was mass hypnosis. We've had the greatest amount of mass hypnosis in the last 5 or 6 years than ever before. And the subconscious is influenced by repetition. That's how that's how basic standard hypnotherapy works. You just feed suggestions into the subconscious, and the client over time, if they keep hearing those suggestions, then the client changes. But from a negative perspective, if you keep telling a child that she's stupid, she'll grow up believing she's stupid, because that's influenced by repetition. In the last few years, the repetition over and over the same phrases, and people were in a heightened state of awareness as well, which is a trance state, with all the fear that was going on. So it was just an extraordinary amount of mass hypnosis. And there's no wonder people fell for it, because, that's the way the mind works, unfortunately.
And to go into something like a trance and then simultaneously not believe in it, I feel like that makes people a bit more susceptible.
Yes. That's exactly the point. I
It's
was you,
like,
you made the point perfectly.
you know,
It's just that the
because
very
they pedestal it. And I'm like,
yes.
no, you see the way you're doing the washing up and you just trance on out. And before you know it, the washing's done.
Yeah.
That, and now add some fuckery to it, like you'll never do anything with your life. And hey presto, there you go. And it's these things. And that's why I'm so, the two stories you told are very synchronistic, as not only did the people have the reoccurring patterns with the place of their trauma as far as the body part, but also the reoccurrence of betrayal and like this family lineage of betrayal, like whether it be a brother or just a family member, or being a child and being forced into something, or and that's why I've been so passionate about childhood recollection all these years. So to hear you make people understand the enormity of the impact that a hypnotherapy could bring for them, it's
So
not,
many
it's
people have,
just,
I call them betrayal issues. So many people have betrayal issues. The ultimate betrayal is when your parents don't care for you. That's the ultimate betrayal. Yes, there are many types of betrayal, of course, but what a child wants and needs is love and affection. And that child wants to feel safe and to know that he or she is the apple of its parents' eyes. That's what a child wants. And when it doesn't get that, it creates some form of fracture inside. And when the parents are malicious towards a child, that for me is the ultimate betrayal. And that can set up a betrayal pattern that later on in life can come out in future relationships. And what, of course, we've got the law of attraction and radiation attraction. If you send out a betrayal energy, you'll bring back bring toward you the people who are going to betray you in this way later on in life. And so I'll often hear clients who have, the father was a brute and a bully, and they end up, with several male relationships, all of whom are brutes and bullies. So, yeah, we tend to run the patterns. And this is why it's so important to have therapy, not just hypnotherapy, regression therapy, but have therapy, good therapy. Go to see a good therapist who understands these things, you can analyze things, you can tease stuff out, you can start to get more of an awareness. Freudian therapy was all about insights, getting insights to things. And once you have an insight, when you understand something, you're halfway towards fixing it. If you don't have an awareness, you can't fix it. You just carry on running the same patterns.
yeah.
So, according to you, what is the role of the soul in the human experience? And how do you perceive this idea around being a soul or having a soul?
Or what people would call the higher self as well, which I find people use the two terms interchangeably. But as to whatever your understanding of it is, or however you go about it in your personal life.
Yeah, I mean, it's an esoteric question. I can only go again, from what I've learned from clients. We don't know. But for me, when our spirit leaves the body and we move into spirit and we move into our light body, then we're free. Then we're able to understand more about the life we've just had. And I mean, the concept of reincarnation, maybe to talk in those terms, the standard concept is over many lifetimes we grow as a soul. And eventually we don't have to keep getting reborn here on planet Asylum. We can move off from that. Just as an aside, having said that, I've had quite a lot of clients who have had past lives on other planets, as other life forms, as extraterrestrials. And that's something that's been happening a lot in the last 2 years, more than ever before. But from a higher perspective, we move on, we grow as a soul, and ultimately we don't have to come back. It's said there are different, spiritualists talk about 12 different levels of spirit, each one being higher than the other. And my understanding is that over time, over many lifetimes, we grow so that eventually we're up there and we don't have to come back down here.
So
Yeah.
so then because you mentioned as well having lives in different planets or different places, we call it often parallel experience or parallel experiences as far as past lives. As far as how we see it with our community, we often refer it to, oh, this is a parallel life, or sort of things like that. And I'm mentioning this because what is your idea around the concept of time? Because I've heard you talking about experiences a client had in the 60s and then in the early 20s. And when I did the math, I was like, wow, that's pretty short lives. It's not that long ago. So, what did you notice when it comes to that?
There's a few things. I mean, first of all, from a technical perspective, nobody understands time at all. We just, we think time is linear. And there's lots of stories that, time, everything is happening at the same time at the moment. What everything that has ever happened is now happening at this very moment, which is pretty mind blowing. I don't pretend to understand that in any way, shape, or form. I'm just a simple jobbing therapist. What I do say is that the subconscious treats time as if it is linear. So when we're going back in regression, it's like we go back down a line of time and then into a past life. But to expand what you were asking to some degree is, the length of time in the spirit between lives can be different for everybody. So sometimes once we die and go into spirit, there are sometimes we get reborn very, very quickly. So the next life comes on very quickly. Other times we can be up in spirit for decades and maybe even centuries before we come back. And there are my clients sometimes tell stories when they are in spirit, in the spirit world, they are getting some form of healing up there as well. It's as if there are spirit guides who come and healing guides who will come and heal them in some ways, which is weird, but this is what clients report sometimes. So I think, it depends on your growth as a soul. It's said that if we really don't want to come back, then we don't have to come back until we can be convinced it's time to come back by these spirit guides. So, it's said that when we're in spirit, it's a very beautiful place. We're very free. We connect with all our loved ones from past lifetimes in our soul groups. But at some stage, we start to set out the template for the next lifetime with some of the souls who are going to be with us in that next life, and in terms of relationships. And we set the templates out. We don't always stick to the templates, it's said, when we come back down into human form. But very often there's a sort of a guiding line, you could say, that takes us into things. That's the traditional viewpoint of reincarnation. There is some more modern thoughts nowadays that we actually don't have to reincarnate at all. And some people call this the white light trap. And David Icke talks about this a lot. He's now fallen into this, although I think it's something that's been talked about really in the last 10 years or so. And there is this concept. I don't know what I agree with, to be honest, but that when we die, it's said that the earth is being overruled by aliens, by negative aliens, and some people will say reptilians, whatever. And they want us to come back down here and suffer because they feed on our fear and our negative emotions energetically. So what some people are saying is that when we die, these beings come and they pretend to be angels or kind spirit guides, and they say, come with us, come into the light and we'll look after you. And then the next thing you know, you're back here down in all the madness, suffering.
I do.
This is wonderful that we're chatting about this because,
It's for the sake of opening the dialogue, really, because
yeah,
I did notice few contradiction, and I actually wanted to ask you if you've encountered people that experienced life review. So during the regression, did they go through a life review, and did that ever happen?
Occasionally, it's not my style of work, I'll be honest. My style is about releasing trauma and getting understandings. But sometimes when we're in spirit, we look back at the life we've lived and we can review and get a deeper understanding of it. And that does happen sometimes, yes. But it's not something I push clients into. If it's gonna happen, it will happen quite spontaneously. Very.
Yeah,
okay.
because the contradiction for me was so we bring back trauma when we reincarnate, and we're supposed to have this life review to actually process all of this. But somewhat, Some say that it's systematic. So basically, when you cross over, you get a life review, and then from there you move on. But obviously, some of it seems to come back, and the life review seems to either been forgotten and or carrying over the trauma again. And it's very surprising because it's quite a challenge to understand what really is taking place. But essentially, that brings me to talk about the role of integration. So what does it mean after a session? What is integration like, and what should someone really do in order to integrate what they've experienced?
As a rule, when the regression has taken place and we finish the session, the client um, generally feels a lot calmer and a lot better inside themselves because we've released energies, we've released emotions which have been holding them back, and they'll very often feel freer. They'll often get more of an understanding of the situation. As I said, no wonder my mother always hated me because I killed her in the past life. And often there's not very much integration that is needed. There's not a lot of let's talk about the session and let's open it up and pick it apart. It's very unlikely that we actually need to do that. It's almost like the client just understands. They just know, okay. And they know it was real. You know, when somebody's been sobbing for an hour and shaking, they know that that's real. They haven't made this up to please me. But the most important thing generally is releasing the emotion and the energy. And then the energy field calms down. And so a person then is, okay, I'm feeling better. I'm not feeling as anxious, or the skin problem isn't flaring up like it was, or whatever. So, in terms of integration, it isn't that type of talking therapy where we spend a lot of time talking about stuff and unpicking stuff. It's really just let things settle now. I often say to clients at the end of a session, I've shaken you up, the dust has to settle now. And there'll be a processing. The processing period after a session is conscious and subconscious. Generally, for up to 48 hours after a session, client will be processing at different levels. So they might get stuff that comes through in the dreams for a couple of nights, which is to do with the session. They might get a bit of a spike of emotion a few hours later. So it's okay, just cry a little bit, it will soften down. But that processing happens very, very naturally. And for some people, the processing is done 10 minutes after a session. They're just done. That's it, fixed. So everybody's different.
I think that your work is really it's such a beautiful process for people to go through because, like you said, it's just like once someone is able to experience something and see it for themselves, that's pretty much open and shut, because a lot of things like, oh well, prove it to me, and it's as if they've proved it to themselves in your session. So it's like, okay, yeah, I saw that was real. And then also, if that's connected to something they're going through physically or emotionally, or like in a relationship they have, and they have now a shift in perspective about it, it's just immediately changed everything for them. The work also, as you were talking about the different realms people feel that they go through when they pass on, and all the transitions they make with, you know, staying on the other side and having guides or angels or whatever realm help them. I laugh about it a little bit because of all of my experiences that I've had in either angel realms or interplanetary realms as well. And I think about it a lot like, yes, and this realm, because someone like you would be considered somebody who does the same work, but on this side of the veil, as far as guiding people through the process of being able to unpick whatever shit it is they were holding on to in their biofield. And it's like, do it now or do it later. It's that type of thing. So I just think the way you've fallen into this work and the way that it's just unfolded is so great for everybody who can actually find you and then go through the process here as well, so they can start enjoying their life experience here as well, because it is so it does. It's funny about the control element that we have, when you're going through the process of this reoccurring pattern and it starts causing problems in your emotional life or in your energy body or whatever, or your physical body, that in itself can control you. It's its own form of something taking control over you. So through the work that you do, being able to free people from that control or have them free themselves from that control is really quite profound. Have you had sessions yourself that you have found profound? I mean, you don't have to share the details of them, but just the being on the other side of the therapy as well.
I'm a great believer that, I mean, first of all, therapy sets you free. Good therapy sets you free. Not just regression therapy, but good therapy with a good therapist who knows what they're doing. It sets you free. And that's such a different way to live life. Secondly, when a person heals and heals from trauma, they change and therefore the world changes. And so I firmly believe that we all need to do the work because the world is in a bad state at the moment. We are needed to help things to change. And when we change, it's like we become light bearers, you could say. We're like our candles are lit in the world. It's a brighter place. So my belief is that as we heal inside, the world heals because everything is connected. Everybody is connected. So doing the work on ourselves with any form of good therapy is important right now on earth because we're all part of this. But yeah, I have regular therapy sessions. They've done me a lot of good. But yeah, because most therapists start therapy. When was the last time you talked to a psychiatrist or a psychologist about their therapy? They've never had it in their lives. They hold a clipboard and judge everybody. No, no, no. Many therapists don't have therapy, which really cheeses me off. We've got stuff. Everybody's got stuff. Work on it and walk your talk. It's about walking your talk. So regular therapy sessions where I swap sessions with a colleague. We do regression work with each other. I worked to heal. I had a marriage breakup 6 years ago, which absolutely devastated me and broke my heart. And I've done a lot of work to heal from that. And the good thing is, when I did heal from it, the woman who was absolutely right for me came into my life after doing a lot of work on healing my broken heart. And we got together as a result of past lives. Well, that's a long story. But more recently last year, my mum died last year in September in the UK. And I was in Florida at the time, so I wasn't with her when she died. And although the family were with her and she died peacefully, I did feel guilty, of course, because, I wasn't there when she died. And a couple of weeks after her death, me and my wife now were in Florida. We went for a meal. And after the meal, my chest started to get very wheezy. And I thought, that's really weird. Have I eaten something that's affected me? And I hadn't. I'd just eaten nothing different to usual. But the wheeziness stayed for a couple of days. And then 2 days later, I had a regression session for me with my colleague. And guess what? My subconscious was already tuning in because in the past life, we went to a past life, I regressed, and the word plague kept coming over and over when I was in trance, over and over. I don't see very much in hypnosis. Many of my clients don't. I work what we call non-visually, just to release energies. But the word plague, and then I realized, I said, it's as if I'm a man and I'm dying of the plague. And I could feel my body, feel my chest getting tight and constricted. And then I said, I think what's happened is my wife and child have died. And I feel a lot of guilt because I brought it home. I brought the plague home to them and I've killed us all. And then I realized that my wife in the past life was my mum in this present lifetime. And so therefore the guilt from the past life was connected to the guilt that I wasn't there when my mum died. And so we did the releasing, and then within a few days, all the tension, all the tightness in the chest has gone. So yeah, so as I say, do the work. I believe in doing the work. I've changed a lot over the years, massively because of regression therapy, and And I just advocate the power of freedom. Feel free, because you become less reactive, and life is so much easier when we're less reactive.
Yes.
Absolutely. You know, obviously, if I had another tea on the go and some hobnobs, we could go on, right? But for the sake of this episode and acting like I'm proper, I will get to my final question with you, Steve. So we usually ask people when they come, in your opinion and only your opinion, and don't give a shit about anyone else's opinion, who are we and why are we here?
I suppose it's the old cliche, we are a spiritual being in a physical body. And that is basically what we are. And, the physical is part of our learning to come to terms with being physical. And as a spiritual being who lives and exists over many, many lifetimes, perhaps tens of thousands of lifetimes, we don't know. It's about growing as a soul. And when we grow as a soul, we change and the world changes, and I think the universe changes. So hopefully that answers your question. I'm not sure if it does. It's a big question.
It does.
It's perfect.
Yeah.
It's perfect. Steve, it's been a lovely conversation, and this is going to touch so many people. And the insights that you've given, I know, are going to be a game changer for so many who had the question and didn't want to ask or didn't know who to ask about it and wanted to look into it. So this has been such an opportunity for them. And as per usual, I had a great natter, so it is what it is. We're going to go on about this all day, okay? But it's been lovely talking to you. Please give us all of the information on your books as well, because I'm sure that people will want to reach out about your books. So,
Okay. Yeah.
if you could give the titles and where people can find them.
Okay. So my website is steveburgesshypnosis.com. steveburgesshypnosis.com. My 3 books, the latest one, The Adventures of a Hypnotherapist. The previous one was The Power of Past Life Regression. And the first one, Famous Past Lives, because I've had some clients who have been very famous in past lifetimes, which is weird stuff. The first 2 books, the Famous Past Lives and Power of Past Life Regression, are also available as audiobooks, which I recorded. I'm recording the Adventures of at the moment. That will be an audiobook at some stage, but they're all 3 are available on Amazon, etc. My Facebook page is The Power of Past Life Regression. I also have a YouTube channel, which is Hypno for All. HYPNO, Hypno, the number 4, ALL, Hypno for All. Now, this is my way of giving back to the world, because on Hypno for All, there are 26 free hypnotherapy recordings to help with all sorts of things: anxiety, irritable bowel, weight loss, all sorts of stuff, childbirth, with easy childbirth. And they're all free. It's my way of, because not everybody can afford therapy. So if people can at least just play recordings regularly, influencing the subconscious in a positive way, they can heal to some degree, and sometimes can heal incredibly well. There's also interviews on there with some of my team members, because I have a team of therapists that I've trained in my regression system, and they're all very good therapists. Also, a couple of videos of past life regression sessions that I've done with one of my team members to work with her fear of deep, dark water. So those are give people an insight into the way in which I work. And I'm on Instagram somehow. I don't understand Instagram in any way, shape, or form. I think it's at Steve Burgess Hypnotherapy, I think. But I usually put bits and pieces on the Power of Past Life Regression Facebook more than anything else.
Okay.
So that's me.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Steve.
My
Wonderful
pleasure. Thank you so much.
conversation.
Been a great chat. Been great chatting with you both. Thank you. Lovely hosts. I've enjoyed it. Thank you.
All right.
Likewise.
So until next time, guys, that's it. And much love. Ciao.
Ciao.